I became the top strategist in the Great Qin by being unscrupulous, mixing sand into the disaster relief grain. I devised a vicious plan to doom 1,000,000 people, but not only did Ying Zheng ennoble me as the Marquis of Heavenly Goodness. Even the common people were willing to trade 1,000,000 of their lives for mine. All because I transmigrated to a special Great Qin Empire. Here, brilliant rulers and talents from every era were gathered together. And I also awakened the poisonous strategist system. As long as I devise vicious strategies, I can obtain viciousness points. And viciousness points can be exchanged for all kinds of treasures. Things like tiger tanks and kidney strengthening essence pills, you name it. At this moment, in the Great Qin's imperial court, Ying Zheng slammed his hand on the golden dragon throne. Countless civil and military officials trembled in fear. Li Si, 500,000 jin of grain were distributed. Why has the price of grain increased instead of decreased? Li Si, breaking out in a cold sweat, took a step forward. It must be that the grain shortage is too severe. Below, the many civil and military ministers shared a tacit understanding. A shortage? We dispatched 500,000 jin of grain to fill that shortage. Who gave those grain merchants the nerve to profit from our national crisis? Great Hall was utterly silent. Ying Zheng took a deep breath. Of course, he knew what was going on. These, upstanding, grain merchants. Why do they show up so quickly every time there's a disaster? Isn't it because these civil and military officials leak the information? They are also the ones secretly manipulating merchants to drive up the price of rice. Forming cliques for personal gain on normal days is one thing, but they even dare to profit from a national crisis, forcing millions of refugees to the point of exchanging children to eat. The fields will be littered with the starved, giving rise to warlords. Ying Zheng cursed inwardly, wishing he could slaughter every single one of these officials. But the 6 states have only just been pacified, and to the south, Li Shimin watches like a tiger. To the east, Zhu Yanzhong is massing troops beyond the pass. As for the Xiongnu, they have repeatedly raided the south. Now is not the time to move against these people. Ying Zheng took another deep breath. How much silver is left in the national treasury? Li Si quickly replied. Reporting to your majesty, there are 500,000 taels of silver remaining, as well as 40 million copper coins. Even for someone as composed as Ying Zheng, he couldn't help but slam his hand on the dragon throne again. Years of constant warfare had left little in the treasury. In order to pacify the refugees of the 6 states, we nearly emptied the state coffers. The original plan was to send down 500,000 jin of grain, to suppress the grain prices and then have the court buy in large quantities. Who would have thought these officials would collude, leaking the news before the grain was even distributed? The grain merchants all stopped selling, causing the prices to increase instead of decrease. At the current grain prices, emptying the treasury would only be enough to buy a few 100,000 jin. First, allocate half to purchase grain. How much grain is in the treasury now? Ying Zheng's heart was bleeding. These bastards, they're making a fortune off my money. It's only 1 more month until the grain harvest. If we don't provide disaster relief now, the refugees who still have some land will absolutely not make it to the autumn harvest. Not only will the previous few 100,000 jin of grain have gone to waste, we'll even have to support these million refugees for another full year. More importantly, the treasury is out of money. How can we allocate funds to manage the floods? If this continues, the number of refugees will only grow. Li Si hurriedly answered. The treasury currently has 150,000 jin of grain. Ying Zheng's expression was grim. At the absolute most, even if we spend every last coin in the treasury, we could only scrape together 600,000 or 700,000 jin of grain. Even if it's cooked into the thinnest porridge, can it sustain these refugees for a month? Besides, these sanctimonious officials, won't they just pull more tricks to raise the grain prices again? They won't even last a month. The Great Qin will be doomed. This is an unwinnable situation. For this disaster relief, which of my ministers has a solution? If it can be properly resolved, I am willing to reward them with 1,000 pieces of gold and grant them the title of Marquis of 10,000 households. Ying Zheng took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the court. At this moment, all the civil and military officials in the court were dead silent. Some looked uneasy, while others seemed to want to speak but held their tongues. Ying Zheng felt a wave of exhaustion. Was there truly not a single person among his officials who could solve this matter? I spend tens of thousands of taels of gold and countless silver every year, just to support this bunch of useless fools? Fine, mobilize all the silver from the national treasury and, at this point, Ying Zheng could only make a desperate gamble. If that fails, he would have no choice but to summon Meng Tian and use military force to suppress those grain merchants. But he feared that the world would descend into chaos once more. To think that after decades of struggle, Central Plains, which he had only just unified, would again face the scourge of war. Ying Zheng felt a sharp pang in his chest. But just at that moment, Your Majesty, I am willing to try. As the officials stood in silence, a clear voice suddenly rang throughout the great hall. Countless eyes turned to the source. When they saw it was a young man, barely in his early 20s. They all frowned. Bai Zan, the grandson of Bai Qi, a 7th-rank civil official who only got his post through ancestral privilege. How dare he speak so brazenly in the main hall? This is something even Chancellor Li Si couldn't solve. And you think you can? Hey, an ignorant brat who doesn't know his place. The civil and military officials all wore looks of ridicule. But my expression remained calm. As a transmigrator from the 21st century, I knew that future generations had countless ways to handle a situation like this. Li Si's expression suddenly turned cold. To think that in all of Great Qin, someone would dare to challenge him. Besides, the grain prices were being secretly inflated by so many officials. How could a wet behind-the-ears whelp like you possibly solve it? Ying Zheng's doubtful gaze fell upon me. To control the grain prices is to go against the entire imperial court. Do you have a solution? And if you fail, what then? If I cannot resolve the grain crisis in Jiangnan, I am willing to be hung from the east gate of the capital and suffer death by 1,000 cuts. At this, all the civil and military officials frowned. Is this kid in a hurry to die, or does he really have a solution? It looks like an impossible situation from every angle. How could it possibly be solved? In the end, all the civil and military officials shook their heads. Bai Zan, Ying Zheng stroked the dragon throne, his heart filled with a myriad of emotions. In the Great Qin Empire's hour of peril, it is once again a member of the Bai family who steps forward. It was as if he could see once more that man from the past, the one who conquered the 6 states for Great Qin and swept all opposition from his path. The late emperor had Bai Qi executed. It was only after he himself ascended the throne that he restored the family's name. Simply because his surname was Bai, Ying Zheng felt a deep sense of goodwill toward him. What's more, he was willing to step up to save the nation from the brink of collapse. Your family are heroes of Great Qin. There is no need to make such a venomous oath. Let's do this. You may take all the several 100,000 units of grain within the capital. My only request is that you ensure the grain is distributed fairly. That way, the Jiangnan region should be able to hold out for another half-month. These words made the civil and military officials frown. Seemed His Majesty intended to protect this upstart. But I stepped forward, bowed, and began to speak. Your Majesty, I don't need a single grain of rice. And if I cannot complete the disaster relief mission, I am willing to accept death as my punishment. When these words were spoken, the civil and military officials were stunned. What, not even a single grain of rice? The first emperor is giving you an out, so why do you insist on running headfirst into a wall? Li Si shook his head. His Majesty is offering you a way to live. And you refuse to take it. You are utterly foolish. The Bai family line is going to be ruined by this kid. Ying Zheng's expression shifted slightly. He hadn't expected this at all. For this kid to dare make such a wild claim, not needing a single grain of rice. What is this kid up to? Is he planning to empty the treasury and run? But of all the officials in the court, he was the only one who stepped forward to share my burden. Should I trust him or not? A variety of emotions flickered in Ying Zheng's eyes. But in the end, he stared at me intently, his mind flashing back to the figure who once, for the Great Qin, swept across the 6 states. The hesitation in his heart vanished in an instant. Fine, I will trust you. I temporarily appoint you as the Imperial Disaster Relief Commissioner and bestow upon you an Imperial Edict. If you encounter any problems along the way, you have the authority to act first and report later. Right now, there's no way out. Even if I were to gamble with hundreds of thousands of caddies of grain. Could I really bet on the price not falling for a month? Throwing more grain at the problem would be useless. Forget it. If he fails, then my only choice is to trample Jiangnan with cavalry once more. He seemed to have made some kind of decision. Meanwhile, Li Si was stunned. His Majesty believed him? And he even issued him a special imperial edict. Could it be that His Majesty wants? Li Si's face suddenly turned cold, while the other civil and military officials just shrugged. This stupid kid just had to jump out and take the fall. Then let him. If the grain price rises instead of falls and the relief effort fails, at least someone has plugged this hole. The next day, I took the imperial edict and set off for the Jiangnan region. After just 1 month, Ying Zheng felt more and more that something was wrong. My capital, Shenyang, is over 1,000 li from the Suzhou and Suzhou regions. News travels slowly, but it shouldn't be that a whole month has passed with no word at all. What is this Bai Zan doing? Could he have really run off with the treasury's gold and silver? Ying Zheng clenched his fists. They made a cracking sound. Summon Meng Tian, but before the words were even out of his mouth, Zhao Gao rushed in. Reporting to Your Majesty, Lord Li Si requests an audience. He says something terrible has happened in Jiangnan. Ying Zheng's royal brow furrowed. He felt a faint sense of unease. Let him in at once. Your Majesty, something terrible has happened in Jiangnan. An urgent report has arrived. Bai Zan entered Jiangnan, and drastically raised the price of rice. It has climbed from 1,000 to 2,000. And it's still rising rapidly. It's probably over 3,000 by now. Rumor on the streets is that he's colluding with local grain merchants to line his own pockets. He's exploiting the common people. The citizens of Jiangnan are crying out in misery. They can no longer live their lives. Li Si reported, having rushed over. Model. Say it all at once. What did you just say? Ying Zheng's eyes widened as he slammed his palm on the table. The whole table nearly shattered. What a menace. 3,000 for 1 jin of rice. Those commoners work themselves to the bone. And in a year, they can only save a little over 10,000 copper coins. A whole year's income can only buy 3 damn jin of rice. Arrest him at once. I shall have this treacherous official torn limb from limb. I'll make him wish he were dead. Beside him, Li Si was trembling from the shock. He couldn't believe it either. Most of the civil and military officials weren't clean themselves. But at most, they would only raise the price of rice by a few hundred per jin. This guy, on the other hand, raises it by 1 or 2,000 right off the bat. The common folk could still empty their savings, robbing Peter to pay Paul. But with a move like this, it'll be a blessing from the heavens if these people don't rebel against Great Qin. In just half a day, the price of grain in Zhongnan reached 3,000. When news of the price per jin reached the capital, the entire city of Shenyang was in an uproar. What a ruthless man. This is what you call a ruthless man. This is what it means to be ruthless, haha. I'm afraid even the resurrection of Lord Wuan couldn't save this kid now. Many of the officials were already corrupt to begin with, and were afraid of being purged by the first emperor. Now, things were perfect. They had a great scapegoat. All of a sudden, all the ministers were pleading for justice, and every one of them was impeaching me. Since he's not afraid to die, let him be the sacrificial lamb. Meanwhile, Ying Zheng's eyes were blazing with fury, his killing intent palpable. At this moment, I had already been brought to Shenyang Palace, bound hand and foot. Countless ministers looked on with mocking sneers, staring at me, a lamb for the slaughter. Bai Zhan, you colluded with the grain merchants to raise the price of grain to 3,000. Is this true? Ying Zheng's hand gripped the dragon throne tightly. His imperial brow was furrowed, his expression icy as he spoke. Your Majesty, I did not. As soon as these words were spoken, the surrounding ministers all let out cold smirks. It's written here in black and white. 3,000 per jin, and you still want to deny it? If you just confess now, perhaps His Majesty will grant you a quick death. Ying Zheng's fury surged. This brat still dares to deny it. Your subject didn't raise the grain price to 3,000. I worked with the grain merchants to raise the price to 5,000. I said, neither humble nor arrogant. What? Instantly, the imperial court erupted into chaos. 3,000 was already the absolute limit. 5,000. Good heavens. He's a damn living king of hell. This is forcing the refugees to rebel. This moment, Ying Zheng's eyes were wide with shock. He was trembling with rage. How could this man be so vicious? Even for Ying Zheng, the emperor who conquered the Central Plains. This was utterly intolerable. Do you have any idea what crime you have committed? Ying Zheng's face was as cold as iron. How could he have ever believed this guy's nonsense? The ancestors of the Bai family? You've brought complete shame upon them. The civil and military officials watched me as if I were a joke. They thought some great, incorruptible official was here to clean up the court. Isn't this just a textbook corrupt official? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him the #1 menace in all of Great Qin. What crime have I committed? I asked in return, puzzled. Ying Zheng slammed his hand on the dragon throne again. Well over 6 feet tall, he shot to his feet with a bang. Even someone as composed as him was so angry his eyebrows were practically standing on end. And you still dare ask what crime you've committed? You've raised the grain prices by a full 5 times. You colluded with the grain merchants to inflate the prices. Can there be any doubt? In this very court, you still dare to deceive the sovereign. Ying Zheng roared. At this moment, Li Si was also looking at me coldly. This young man doesn't know restraint. He loves putting on an act. I really thought he had some special trick up his sleeve. Turns out he's just a mediocre talent, and a fool whose mind is filled with nothing but money. His Majesty gave you a way out and you didn't take it. You're truly courting death. As for the civil and military officials, they were looking at me as if I were an idiot. Looking at me, Your Majesty, this treacherous villain who brings disaster to our nation. Drag him out, tie him up outside Shenyang Palace, and execute him. To appease the people's hatred, Li Si quickly interjected. Meanwhile, many of the civil and military ministers were secretly delighted. The death of this fool, Bai Zhan, would mean it would help wipe their own slates clean. They really had to thank this idiot. We implore Your Majesty to execute this fiend to appease the people's hatred. In an instant, all the officials spoke in unison and knelt down as one. And Ying Zheng gave me a deep look. Could it be that I, the sovereign, was mistaken about him after all? Then drag him away. A report. An urgent report from Zhongnan. Just at that moment, an 800 Li Express message arrived. The messenger eunuch scrambled and crawled into the main hall. Something's happened in Zhongnan. Don't tell me those refugees are actually going to rebel. Ying Zheng's face turned grim. He had already prepared for the worst. The 1 million refugees in Zhongnan are now gathered together. When this sentence was announced, Ying Zheng's expression had turned extremely dark. Not good. The disaster victims in Zhongnan are going to rebel. This kid, Bai Zhan, is truly a living king of hell. As for the officials, their expressions at this moment were rather calm. Some even lowered their heads to hide their delight. Because these were the very people they had exploited. Besides, these were unarmed commoners. This was a perfect chance to crush them, which would both solve the refugee problem and completely wipe their own slates clean. To earn a bit of money from these traitors could be called justice, or joining together to submit a joint petition to Shenyang Palace, requesting Your Majesty to spare Bai Zhan's life. If you refuse, the 1 million refugees are willing to offer their 1 million lives in exchange for Bai Zhan's 1 life. The head eunuch, Zhao Gao, read this sentence with his eyes wide in disbelief. A petition from 1 million people. They were even willing to trade 1 million lives for Bai Zhan's single life. This was something unheard of in the over 400-year history of the Great Qin Empire. An unprecedented event, and Ying Zheng's expression changed dramatically. What? It wasn't just him. The entire court, from top to bottom, was utterly dumbfounded. This kid raised the prices by 5 times. And these people still want to jointly thank him? They want to trade 1,000,000 lives for his one life? Have I gone mad, or has the whole world gone mad? Say that again. Even a great ruler like Ying Zheng, at this moment, suspected he had misheard. 1,000,000 people are jointly petitioning Shenyang, begging your majesty to spare Bai Zan's life. If you refuse, model. They're willing to trade 1,000,000 lives for Zan's. Zhao Gao read the sentence, emphasizing each word. He was shocked to his core. It wasn't just in the Great Qin, but in the entire world. What wise minister has ever been so beloved by the common people? My god, it's actually true. What kind of spell has this kid cast on the people? The world has gone mad. All the civil and military officials stood there with their mouths agape, simply unable to believe it. Meanwhile, Li Si was staring daggers at me. At that moment, he actually felt a pang of jealousy. In his decades as an official, when had he ever received such overwhelming support from the people? A petition with 1,000,000 names, something unprecedented in the entire world. Ying Zheng was also stunned. He took a deep breath and looked at me, still not understanding. We do not understand why. At that moment, his gaze became clear again. He had a gut feeling that this young man had somehow resolved the issue. And had done so flawlessly. The other officials also perked up their ears, afraid of missing a single word. It's very simple. I asked your majesty for all the gold and silver in the national treasury and spread the word that it was solely for purchasing grain. As a result, grain prices in the Jiangnan region skyrocketed before I even arrived. By the time I got there, the price was already 1,500 per jin. Your humble servant felt that wasn't enough, so I told all the grain merchants that I was willing to buy at a price of 3,000 per jin, as long as they gave me a kickback. Your majesty, can you guess what happened next? I asked, speaking slowly and deliberately, posing the question to Ying Zheng. Ying Zheng furrowed his brow. Then, it dawned on him. Could it be? Brilliant. 1,000 per jin isn't enough to entice grain merchants from all over to travel thousands of miles. But at 3,000 per jin, they would be willing to pay any price. The rush here, Ying Zheng continued. As a peerless emperor, he naturally had that kind of insight. That's right. Grain merchants from all over the world came flocking. In fact, because I raised the price to 5,000, even merchants from other empires crossed the borders to come. Suddenly, there was a surplus of grain and a shortage of buyers. And I deliberately held off on buying. But for them to travel 1,000, or even several thousand, miles to go back, the cost was too great. And so, the prices started to plummet. The price of grain dropped all the way from the original 5,000, and then I sealed off all the roads. This made it increasingly difficult for the merchants to return. In just 7 days, the price fell to 200 per jin. In 10 days, it was down to 30 per jin. And now, it has fallen to the lowest price in the history of the Great Qin Empire, 5 wen per jin. I said, enunciating every word. At this moment, in the imperial court, every single official felt a chill run down their spine, and they couldn't help but gasp. 5 wen per jin. Doesn't that mean everyone can eat their fill? Terrifying. This strategy. Every step was perfectly linked to the next. Announcing the price, raising the price, deceiving the merchants, cutting off their escape routes, and forcing the prices down. It's truly a masterstroke. It's just a bit too devious. After all, those merchants came rushing over so eagerly, only to be ruined so badly they lost the shirts off their backs. Even someone as brilliant as Ying Zheng, his gaze toward me was filled with a sense of admiration. Indeed, even for someone like him, it would have been nearly impossible to devise such a flawless plan. But Li Si still felt something was wrong. He wanted to find fault. Even so, that's not enough for the common people to jointly petition for you. Or even be willing to travel 1,000 miles to Shenyang to trade 1,000,000 of their lives for yours. That statement did make the civil and military officials, including Ying Zheng, a bit more clear-headed. This plan was indeed perfect, but for those common people, he's at most a good official. After all, lowering grain prices is what he was supposed to do. What could make the people willing to give their lives to save him? On what grounds? All the civil and military officials had their doubts, and even Ying Zheng was curious. It's simple. I also took care of the flood problem while I was at it. I said calmly. What? The flood problem is solved? You're bragging. The Yangtze River flows through the Jiangnan region. For 1,000 years, no one has been able to solve it. In this imperial court, how dare you make such a boast? This is the crime of deceiving the emperor. At this moment, Li Si also showed his disbelief. Managing the refugees of Jiangnan, he did indeed perform a service. But claiming to solve the flood is just too absurd. You are deceiving the emperor. Shut up. Ying Zheng let out a sharp rebuke, then turned his expectant gaze towards me. Perhaps this fellow really does have this ability. My dear minister, explain it in detail. At this moment, Li Si was standing silently to the side, burning with jealousy, staring daggers at me. His Majesty actually believes him. Your Majesty. At first, the price of grain plummeted, but because the refugees had already run out of money and food. Even if the prices were lower, they couldn't afford a single pound of rice. Therefore, as your humble servant, I implemented a work for relief program, having these refugees go to the flood areas to build dams. In doing so, they could earn money and food. with 1.3 million refugees working together. The flood dams were all successfully completed in less than 20 days. And because of the work for relief program, every refugee earned enough money and food to return home. I explained eloquently, it's precisely because I not only enabled them to afford food, but I also ensured they had enough to eat, and even secured their future so they wouldn't have to worry about food anymore. Common people are like that. If you keep them in your heart, they will hold you in the palm of their hands. So that's how it was. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Using those refugees to build the dams not only solved their food problem, but it also solved the flood problem. Although these civil and military officials know you made those grain merchants suffer a huge loss, and their investments went down the drain, they have no choice but to acknowledge your strategy. One link connected to the next. Truly impressive. As for Li Si, his face was flushed beet red at this moment. This damned fellow, how can he have so many twists and schemes? Beautiful. Ying Zheng was completely captivated as he listened. He couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh heartily. Why has the flood problem been unsolvable for so many years? To put it bluntly, it's because the Great Qin Empire had no money. Where would the money come from to mobilize over 1 million people to work? Now, without spending a single coin, the entire problem is solved. It's simply too brilliant. When Ying Zheng looked at me, there was a fiery passion in his eyes. To have such a minister, what more could one ask for? For Great Qin to have such a wise and capable minister, how could I not sweep across the 6 realms and dominate the 8 wastelands? Thinking of this, Ying Zheng had another idea. As I have said before, a reward of 1,000 gold pieces. And the title of Marquis of 10,000 households. Now that you have accomplished this, then I shall grant you the title of Marquis. You have shown such benevolence in Zhongnan. 1 million people have signed petitions in your name, so I shall name you the Marquis of Heavenly Benevolence. As Ying Zheng spoke, the eyes of all the civil and military officials filled with envy. That's the title of a Marquis. And the Marquis of Heavenly Benevolence, no less. Such a virtuous title. Li Si's eyes grew even redder with jealousy. He had struggled his whole life and still hadn't been made a Marquis. The flames of jealousy were practically shooting from his eyes. However, you do have some talent for strategy and planning. Before your Marquisate is established, you will remain by my side and serve as the Grand Marshal for a time, Ying Zheng continued. And I quickly nodded, your subject obeys. In just one short day, the news about me spread throughout all of Shenyang. All at once, the name of the Marquis of Heavenly Benevolence was on everyone's lips. But those grain merchants wanted to cry but had no tears. Marquis of Heavenly Benevolence? My ass. He's nothing but a scheming bastard. A treacherous con artist who will ruin you. We worked our butts off, traveled thousands of miles just to make a little money, and ended up getting scammed out of the shirts on our backs. I heard that Bai Zhan has solved the flooding in Zhongnan. Zhao Ji was massaging Ying Zheng's neck. Yes, not only did he solve the famine, he also managed the floods and even won over the hearts of the people in the Zhongnan region. Ying Zheng said, his mind filled with 1,000 thoughts. After conquering the 6 states, pacifying their people has always been a difficult problem. He had even considered ruling through enfeoffment. Who would have thought that a single Bai Zhan could solve all these problems? What about the Zhongnu matter? Why not have him come up with a plan for that as well? Zhao Ji suggested. Speaking of this descendant of a great general, this heaven-sent genius Ying Zheng spoke of, she was also incredibly curious about him. This man is skilled in strategy, but I'm afraid he knows nothing of military affairs. When he mentioned the Zhongnu, the sharp glint in Ying Zheng's eyes dimmed considerably. There was also some resentment. Meng Tian is leading a 300,000-strong army to guard the northwest. The Zhongnu have repeatedly raided the border, and the people of the northwest are suffering immensely. Every year during the farming season, these Zhongnu ride through the passes to plunder. Tens of thousands of our people are killed or injured each time. Recently, they even made an outrageous demand. They want an annual tribute of 500,000 in silver and 100,000 in gold, as well as countless silks. And what's more, they want me, the emperor, to declare myself a subject to their Chanyu. Have you forgotten? He is the grandson of Bai Qi. Zhao Ji said. Her words made Ying Zheng hesitate. Sigh, let's hope so. Meng Tian has no strategy right now. Let's have him give it a try. Meanwhile, on my end, I was looking at the reward from the system. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Congratulations, host. Vicious scheme successfully executed. Reward, 50,000 vicious strategist points. Current redeemable items list, Tiger Tank. 5 million. Maxim machine gun blueprint. 4 million. Reanimation pills. 30,000. Wow, they even have Tiger Tanks. Looking at the dazzling exchange list, I couldn't help but be stunned. If I drove this thing out, I'm afraid it could tear right through the entire divine land. As for the Maxim machine gun, that's the Terminator of nomadic tribes. Lord Bai, His Majesty requests your presence. Zhao Gao's voice called out. When I entered the hall, Ying Zheng's expression had already grown increasingly grim. These animals, these bastards. They knew about the recent floods in Zhongnan and took the opportunity to raid the south. All 6 cities in the northwest are lost. Ying Zheng stared at the urgent report from the border. His killing intent was sharp. Your Majesty. Seeing that I had arrived, Ying Zheng suppressed his inner rage. After I came in, he handed me the urgent report from the table. My dear minister, the Zhongnu in the northwest are rampant. They've repeatedly raided the south and even sent a letter demanding that we submit to them as a vassal. Do you have a strategy? In truth, Ying Zheng didn't hold out much hope. Why couldn't they defeat the Xiongnu? It's very simple. The 6 states have just been pacified. There's no money, there's no grain, and there's a pile of problems in the south. Even the most clever housewife can't cook without rice. It's a dead end. Even he couldn't think of a solution. So this is what it's about. My heart leapt with joy. Wiping out the Xiongnu? Isn't that very simple? I have a plan. It can completely annihilate the Xiongnu. Wiping out the Xiongnu is a bit difficult. My dear minister, you. What? Annihilate the Xiongnu? Ying Zheng snapped back to his senses. His eyes widened. You must understand. For the hundreds of years since the founding of the Great Qin, the Xiongnu problem has never been solved. Even Li Shimin in the north had a massive headache over this, even though he was a military genius seen once in 1,000 years. In just a few years, he pacified 1,000,000 Turks, yet he was completely helpless against the Xiongnu. The Turks would fight in organized groups, but the Xiongnu just hit and run. Few chase, all raid. It was an unbreakable cycle. Zhao Gao, standing to the side, gave a doubtful look. This Lord Bai, could it be that because of the Zhongnan affair, he has become this arrogant? Annihilate the Xiongnu? That's something the Great Qin failed to solve even with the accumulated efforts of 6 generations of rulers. How can a kid in his early 20s? My dear minister, quickly, tell me your plan. Ying Zheng spoke, his heart filled with endless anticipation. Does your majesty know what the Xiongnu rely on to live? Nomadism, Ying Zheng blurted out. The northwest region is a boundless grassland. Nomadism is the most suitable way of life there. And nomadism relies on herds of sheep and cattle. We just need to collect all the sick sheep and sick cattle from across the land. Use catapults to launch them into the Xiongnu camps. Within just 1 month, the Xiongnu's 1,000,000-strong herds can be destroyed. Plagued sheep, plagued cattle, gulp. Ying Zheng swallowed hard. Damn, that's just too vicious. Wouldn't this be an offense against the heavens? And I just named him the Marquis of Heavenly Benevolence. What part of this is benevolent in the slightest? Even Zhao Ji, standing by his side, subconsciously felt that this was far too inhumane. But, she had to admit, this plan was too powerful, too sinister. It's practically a perfect counter. The northwest is just a vast grassland interspersed with desert. It's not like the Xiongnu can just start farming, can they? Although this plan is good, the main problem right now is that the Xiongnu have already invaded south. How are we supposed to drive them out? Ying Zheng shook his head. Poisoning millions of their cattle and sheep is indeed a good strategy. But how are we supposed to fight them head on right now? We don't have any money. We can't even afford to buy the sick cattle and sheep for the plan. I blinked and asked, does your majesty perhaps think that we can't defeat them in a direct fight? Ying Zheng shook his head in disappointment. This Lord Bai still knows nothing of warfare. 1 Qin soldier is a match for 10 barbarians. Direct confrontation has always been Great Qin's strong suit. The problem is, war demands a huge amount of money and provisions. A while ago, when you were governing Zhongnan, you spent everything in the state treasury. Now, there are only 150,000 units of grain left. How are we supposed to raise an army to fight them? Ying Zheng let out a deep sigh. It's a no-win situation. Why do you think Meng Tian can't stop the Xiongnu's southern advance? He's out of provisions. The amount of grain an army consumes has always been astronomical. 500,000 units of grain were recently sent to manage Zhongnan. Where are we supposed to find extra provisions to send to the border? Meng Tian lacks provisions, so he can only defend. He cannot attack. Once the Xiongnu break through our defenses to plunder, we'll be completely helpless. But I retorted, who said the state treasury is out of grain? At this, Ying Zheng, Zhao Ji, and even Zhao Gao all turned to look at me with suspicion. Has this guy, has he gone mad? You took all the money, and the 500,000 units of grain are gone too. Where did the provisions come from? Previously, the price of grain was suppressed to 5 yuan per jin. I purchased a total of 8 million jin. The convoy transporting 5 million of that should have already reached Shenyang. What? Ying Zheng's eyes widened. 8 million jin. Holy hell, when have we ever fought such a lavish war? 8 million jin of grain. That's enough to fight the Xiongnu back to their ancestors. Wait a minute, why have only 5 million arrived in Shenyang? Zhao Ji asked, confused. What about the other 3 million? This brought Ying Zheng back to his senses. That's right, where are the other 3 million? I replied, the remaining 3 million jin, I sold to the grain merchants. Sold to them? For 5 yuan a jin? My dear minister, have you gone mad? In times like these, where on earth could you buy grain for 5 yuan a jin? Ying Zheng sighed, this is giving me a headache. 5 yuan a jin, that's selling at a complete loss. These days, grain costs more than 20 yuan anywhere you go. At this, Zhao Ji was also incredulous. 5 yuan a jin, you sold 3 million jin, Lord Bai. Are you a fool? Such a devastating loss. Lady Zhao nearly fainted, and as for Zhao Gao, he too felt a gut-wrenching pain. This is just too foolish. Forget 5 yuan, even for 15 yuan. The imperial court would have gladly bought it all. I shrugged, spread my hands, and said, no, that's not it. I sold it for 4,000 yuan per jin. Therefore, I have 12 million taels of silver, which is now on its way to the national treasury. The great Emperor Ying Zheng actually cursed out loud. How much? 12 million. That's 6 years of tax revenue for the Great Qin Empire. Gang spent just 1 month and bled those grain merchants completely dry. Did you strip them down to their very last coin? That's beyond ruthless. Even Lady Zhao, the Queen Dowager, was slack-jawed at this moment, unable to believe her ears for the longest time. But, how could they possibly be willing to pay 4,000 wen per jin? Ying Zheng asked, coming to his senses. He simply didn't believe it, even suspecting I was making it all up. Just then, Lady Zhao and Zhao Gao also recovered. That's right. The price inside the city is already 5 wen per jin. How could you sell it for 4,000? How could anyone be that stupid? As I've said before, I sealed off the main roads out of the city. All those grain merchants pouring in from the outside had no idea the price inside had dropped. They still assumed it was 5,000 per jin. When they arrived outside of Zhongnan, I told them that I had grain for 4,000 wen a jin. With a continuous supply, they bought all of it. I rubbed my nose. Hearing myself say it, I'm actually a little embarrassed. After all, those merchants spent 4,000 per jin on grain, only to go inside and find out it's only worth 5 wen. It's a pretty dirty trick, isn't it? Hiss. Ying Zheng sucked in a cold breath. He felt a tingling on his scalp. That's so damn vicious. In the blink of an eye, you made the merchants suffer a devastating loss, 800 times what they just paid. To think that Great Qin has produced such a talent. I just smiled and asked in return. This much money and grain, do you think your majesty can drive out the Zongnu? Drive them out? I'm going to annihilate them. Ying Zheng's eyes blazed with passion, sweeping away all his earlier gloom. Before, I was thinking of saving money to build the Great Wall for defense. Now that we have money and grain, and with Lord Bai's plague, the Great Wall? To hell with building a wall. We'll charge straight into their homeland. We'll wipe out the entire Zongnu tribe and flatten their lands. For hundreds of years, Great Qin, striving through 6 successive reigns, has failed to solve the problem that has plagued dozens of states in this divine land for countless years. Is it finally going to be solved by me? Ying Zheng's chest burned with endless passion. If this succeeds, I will be the emperor of all ages. Bai Zan, you are a genius among geniuses. He looked at me with boundless anticipation. We strike. We will take the fight to the Zongnu. And at that very moment, in the frontline camp, what? They want us to throw dead sheep and cattle over? What kind of ridiculous plan is that? I heard it was proposed by someone named Bai Zan. It's a rather vicious scheme, I'll give him that. But the Zongnu have already raided south and plundered over 100,000 jin of grain. They didn't bring any cattle or sheep, so what the hell are we supposed to throw? A civil official. What does he know about the art of war? Civil officials will be the ruin of this country, a sharp voice bellowed from within the camp. His expression was quite grim. Father, somehow, the first emperor has believed the words of some charlatan and is ordering us to throw plague-ridden livestock. Meng Yi spoke, his expression just as grim. Right now, the empire has no money and no grain to spare. Where are we supposed to get the silver for plague-ridden livestock? I hear this charlatan is a descendant of Bai Qi, no less. Hey, he's truly tarnished the great name of Bai Qi. HMPH. This time, if that brat can't manage to procure a few 100,000 jin of provisions, then after this is over, I will personally go to Shenyang for an audience with His Majesty and accuse him of being a civil official who is ruining our country. What provisions could he possibly raise? That bunch of civil officials has already bled the empire's coffers dry. Is he some kind of god? Does he think he can just conjure those provisions out of thin air? As the generals were all discussing this heatedly, at that very moment, an urgent report came in. The Marquis of Tianshan's provisions have arrived. They're actually 10 days early? Meng Tian's expression changed slightly. With no time to think, he took a dozen of his generals and immediately rushed to the city gates. But all he saw were about 20 horse-drawn carts. In an instant, his brow furrowed. Is this it? He was seething with rage. All of this combined is, at most, a few tens of thousands of jin of grain. I have 300,000 men under my command. To put it bluntly, even if they were only eating kanji, they would finish it all in a single day. That brat really is a beast. No matter how frugal His Majesty is being, he would never send only this much. That beast. He even dares to embezzle the front line's military provisions. The reporting soldier quickly spoke up. No, no, no. This is just the silver that the Marquis sent. The silver. 20 carts. Meng Tian's expression changed slightly. 200,000 taels of silver. Grain isn't too expensive here on the frontier. Although prices have skyrocketed over in Zhongnan, they're relatively stable here in the borderlands. 200,000 taels. That could buy 4 million jin of grain. 200,000 taels. HMPH. I suppose the brat has some conscience after all, Meng Yi said. His previously stern expression softened slightly. But it will take time to purchase the provisions. No, no, no. This is less than a tenth of the money. Lord Bai sent 4 million taels of silver. And of course, there are also 3 million jin of provisions. The messenger added, what, 400,000 taels of silver? And 3 million jin of provisions. How could this be possible? The many generals were suddenly frozen in place. Every one of them was dumbfounded, simply in disbelief. You have to understand, the empire has only just been pacified. We might not even collect 2 million taels of silver in a whole year, and yet this kid sent over 4 million taels in one go. Even Meng Tian felt his eyelids twitching at this moment. This is too fantastical, isn't it? Weren't we told the entire national treasury only had a few 100,000 taels of silver? And also, 3 million jin of provisions. Where did that come from? The messenger pointed towards the city and said, "Everyone, please look." Looking in the direction he was pointing, cart after cart of silver was being unloaded, reflecting a silvery glow under the bright daylight. Gulp. All the officers and soldiers present swallowed hard. They gulped down a mouthful of saliva. So much silver. They had never seen so much in their entire lives. It could probably pave a road for dozens of li. Over there are the 3 million jin of provisions brought by Lord Bai. Then, the messenger pointed in another direction. Thousands of horse-drawn carts were unloading grain. The provisions stretched out like a boundless golden sea. Gulp. The dozen or so generals were all swallowing their saliva. So shocked they were utterly speechless. This Lord Bai, what kind of monster is he? I'm not seeing things, am I? Is there really this much silver? And provisions? As for Meng Yi, his eyes were also wide with shock. Meng Tian, on the other hand, took a deep breath. Of course, in his heart, he didn't believe that young brat could have pulled this off. But, now that they had this money and these provisions, forget tens of thousands of Xiongnu cavalry, even if there were hundreds of thousands. So what, then? Attack the Xiongnu to the north. A sharp glint flashed in Meng Tian's eyes. The blood in his veins seemed to boil. With this money and these provisions, he was going to slaughter every last one of these beasts head-on. That day, all the soldiers on the border feasted on meat. Yes, I not only delivered 3 million jin of provisions, but also several thousand horses. They are only fit for eating. Are you saying that Lord Bai openly raised the prices to trick you into coming? And then fleeced you for all you were worth? What's more, he made 12 million taels of silver in one go? Looking at the grain merchant before him, Meng Tian's eyes widened. It would have been better if he hadn't said anything. At his words, the grain merchant's eyes filled with tears. That damned Lord Bai, not only did he make 12 million taels of silver off us, he also bought all our grain at a low price. And on top of that, we had to agree to transport the grain for him. Before he was even willing to purchase it, the grain merchants were crying their eyes out. Not only that, they also had to promise that once they arrived, they would slaughter the horses to provide meat for the soldiers. This Lord Bai is truly a beast. The merchant was so angry he beat his chest and stomped his feet. But before he could utter the next word, a glare from Meng Tian silenced him. Meng Tian and his son exchanged a look. The shock in their hearts was overwhelming. This Lord Bai is truly a genius among geniuses. He not only tricked the grain merchants out of their rice but also wants to make money off them. He's even making them work for him for free. So ruthless. So ruthless. Indeed, those civil officials really know how to use their heads. Meng Tian began to speak, and the father and son exchanged a look. And burst out laughing. That day, a legend spread through the barracks, the legend of Bai Zhan. Dozens of military generals, who had once genuinely despised civil officials, were now utterly convinced. Those civil officials are truly formidable. Meanwhile, they were rampaging southwards in a frenzy. Report, Meng Tian is leading an army of 200,000 south. They are closing in to attack. Hey, this Meng Tian, seems he's nothing but a fool. Chan Yu Tumen sneered. Indeed, the Great Qin Empire is suffering from severe floods in the south, and the national treasury is empty. They have no surplus funds or provisions to support the northern border. Yet this Meng Tian dares to attack personally. Their provisions can last 3 to 5 days at most. After that, the entire northern region of Great Qin will fall without a fight. Grand Marshal Luan Ping spoke mockingly. Soon, the Great Qin's iron cavalry came in pursuit. Luman sneered and immediately turned to retreat. The Great Qin is short on provisions. We just need to stall them for a few days. And they will collapse on their own. But shortly after, he was baffled. 10 days. For a full 10 days, they were still chasing him. Moreover, their morale had soared to an absurd degree. They were all fired up, as if they'd been pumped full of adrenaline. But no, where did they get all these provisions? The Chan Yu was bewildered. He had already run 3 of his horses to death, and General Luan Ping, in order to cover the retreat, was beheaded by Meng Tian. 3 days later, the Chan Yu's army was sliced apart by Meng Tian. The 80,000-strong southern force was cut down, leaving fewer than 20,000 survivors. The Chan Yu himself was even struck by an arrow, and one of his arms was almost crippled. XXX. Where are these people getting their provisions from? Why is today's delivery nothing but rice dishes, the kind the Qin people eat? Where's the meat? The Chan Yu angrily swept all the food to the ground. He was in a blind rage. Reporting, Great King, those treacherous Qin people threw plague-ridden cattle and sheep at us. Now, throughout the entire northern region, millions of our cattle and sheep have all been infected with the plague. The commoners who ate them have also contracted a virulent disease. Before the servant could finish, the Chan Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. This Xiongnu king, who had rampaged for half his life, felt utter despair in that moment. Ruthless. So ruthless. And with that, he passed out completely. In less than 3 days, the Chan Yu sent a message to Shenyang, expressing his willingness to submit to the Great Qin. Inside Shenyang Palace, the many civil and military officials were buzzing with discussion. I heard His Majesty ask that Bai Zhan to devise a plan to expel the Xiongnu. Hey, what kind of strategy could he come up with? He's not Lord Wuan. GG, that's true. The art of war is unpredictable, but Ying Zheng was acting as if victory was already in his grasp. When he found out the grain merchants themselves were delivering the provisions and were even sending them all the way to the border, he knew the battle was already won. This Bai Zhan really handled things flawlessly. Report: a letter has arrived from the Zongnu Chanyu. During the morning court session, a loud shout was heard. And as for me, at that moment, I was just stretching lazily. Congratulations, host. The venomous plot has been perfectly executed. Reward: 110,000 venomous strategist points. Current points: 150,000. The venomous strategist points were credited. It seems the strategy was carried out perfectly. I opened the redemption tab. 3 Maxim machine guns, complete with 10,000 rounds. Cost: 150,000 venomous strategist points. 1 M24 sniper rifle, with an 8x scope and 100 bullets, cost: 120,000 points. Steam engine blueprints and the actual machine, 150,000 points. The selection was truly dazzling. But for now, there was nothing I wanted to redeem. Just imagine, after saving up enough venomous strategist points to get a whole tiger tank. In this feudal era, who could possibly stand in its way? Thinking of this, Bai Zhan licked his lips. The Zongnu Chanyu's letter this time is to propose a marriage alliance. Everyone, what are your thoughts? Ying Zheng's gaze swept over the ministers. This one sentence broke the composure of many civil and military officials. So your profound method is to have us marry off our women and pay a dowry? Even a pig at the village entrance could have come up with that answer. Besides, a marriage alliance with the Zongnu. Marrying off a woman and paying them money. This is a disgrace that will last a lifetime. Your Majesty, you cannot listen to the words of a treacherous official and actually go through with some marriage alliance. Li Si quickly stepped forward. He began to speak. He had already had his thunder stolen by this brat. Now that he finally had an opportunity, he was determined to drag him down. Ying Zheng watched Li Si with great interest, a smile playing on his lips. Your Majesty, the Zongnu have repeatedly provoked our central plains. They have proposed marriage alliances many times, and even demanded that we become their vassals. If we agree, it will be telling all the other great nations that our great Qin can be bullied by anyone. Your Majesty, this is a shame for 10,000 generations. It will certainly be recorded in the history books. Li Si bowed and spoke again. He knew very well that for a formidable ruler who had conquered the 6 states, how much Ying Zheng cared about being criticized in the annals of history. That's right, Your Majesty. Certain treacherous officials don't understand military strategy. A momentary show of weakness will become an eternal weakness. From now on, the great Qin will never have a chance to recover. Many of the civil officials shouted, "Treacherous official," one after another, while casting sarcastic glances at me. But Ying Zheng watched the civil and military officials in the Great Hall with amusement, and asked with a smile. Everyone disagrees, and it's not because we are being contentious. It's because this is a disgrace to the great Qin, Li Si said. He knew as well that the Zongnu didn't just want a marriage alliance. They had even sent multiple letters demanding that the great Qin submit to them. This time, he was determined to nail Bai Zhan to the pillar of shame. Your Majesty, you must not listen to the words of this treacherous minister. The one who proposed such a plan is truly a scoundrel. I implore Your Majesty to punish him. And just like that, all the civil and military officials of the court knelt and spoke up. Li Si bowed, performing a salute with both hands, unable to hide the cold smirk on his face. This time, he'd like to see how this kid was going to talk his way out of this. Who said anything about marrying off our daughter and submitting? It's the Zongnu who want to marry their daughter over to us and submit to us. What's more, they will pay an annual tribute to our great Qin of 300,000 taels of silver and 100,000 sheepskins. And countless rare treasures. Ying Zheng clapped his hands and burst out laughing. This made me glance warily at the emperor. It seemed this great ruler was also eager to see the looks on these officials' faces. The expressions of the civil and military officials changed drastically. What? Submit to us? And marry their daughter to us? The Chanyu's princess? Is going to marry one of us? 300,000 taels of silver and 100,000 sheepskins annually? That's more than the tax revenue of an entire province in our great Qin. The entire court instantly erupted in an uproar. As for Li Si's cold smirk, it froze on his face in an instant. How is this possible? Have the Zongnu gone mad? Shocked exclamations of the court officials were endless. Meanwhile, Ying Zheng's smile grew even wider. Zhao Gao, you will read aloud Lord Bai's strategy. Ying Zheng said, looking at me with great interest. Having ascended the throne from his position as a hostage prince, he desperately needed a high-ranking minister he could trust completely. This public reading was also a way to express his own intentions before all the civil and military officials. Bai Zhan is Ying Zheng's capable minister. A favored minister. When the Marquis Tianxian first sold grain to the merchants, he established a rule. The merchants had to transport the grain back to the border for free. Furthermore, they had to gift the horses pulling the carts to the soldiers for food, and he sold the grain at the high price of 4,000 yuan. He sold it to foreign enemy merchants attracted by the high price, earning tens of millions of silver taels. With the border's funds and provisions secured, sweeping away the Zongnu will be a simple matter. Zhao Gao slowly read out the strategy. He also shot me a wary glance from the corner of his eye. To have reached his position as Grand Steward, his insight was naturally incredibly sharp. Even he had to admit that this Lord Bai was truly formidable. Or perhaps, ruthless enough, vicious enough, cruel enough, a true devil. After the strategy was read in its entirety, every single civil and military official stared with wide eyes. Completely dumbfounded. You can actually play it like that? Isn't this clearly a living king of hell? Buying up grain for 5 wen coins, and then selling it for 4,000 wen, that's a nearly 1,000-fold profit. On top of that, he even forced these grain merchants to transport the grain for free. He even had them slaughter the transport horses for their meat. How can he be called the Marquis of Heavenly Kindness? This is clearly the king of hell, isn't he? But, if it were only that, at most he could only drive out the Zongnu. Li Si frowned deeply. He couldn't help but speak. Why are the Zongnu so difficult to eliminate? You can't beat them in a fight. They'll just chase you, and you can't outrun them. If you manage to beat them, they'll just flee. And you still won't be able to catch them. These words made all the civil and military officials of the court nod in agreement. Indeed, the mobility of the Zongnu is notoriously terrifying. Even the great Hans Huo Qubing, who pursued them all the way to the Langjushu Mountains, was unable to completely annihilate them. As for making them submit as vassals, that is utterly impossible. The Marquis of Heavenly Kindness collected the corpses of plague-ridden cattle and sheep and used catapults to launch them among the Zongnu herds. Millions of the Zongnu's cattle and sheep became infected, and what's more, this plague could even infect humans. In just half a month. The Zongnu's left worthy king also became infected and died a few days ago. Zhao Gao slowly announced the answer. Hiss. A wave of sharp, indrawn breaths swept through the imperial court. To throw plague-ridden livestock over. This is far too vicious, isn't it? This is an act of genocide. The Marquis of Heavenly Kindness, a title meant to signify the greatest benefactor in the world. But aren't his actions precisely those of a living king of hell? The initial disdain had already turned to fear. Such a venomous strategist. What if he were to turn one of his poisonous plots on us? We would be doomed beyond salvation. Your Majesty, such a venomous plot, is it not a bit too cruel? It has caused millions of people to suffer terribly. Furthermore, if this isn't brought under control, it could wipe out tens of millions of nomads. An act like this defies the laws of heaven. Your Majesty, you absolutely must not permit this. Li Si spoke up, still trying to appeal to benevolence and morality. Save a bit of face. Cruel? The smile on Ying Zheng's face vanished instantly. When the Zongnu come south to plunder, has it ever not resulted in devastating casualties among the people of my great Qin? Have you not seen, on the northern frontier, how countless of our people are slaughtered like livestock? Year after year, rivers of their blood have flowed. The young women of my great Qin are herded away and kept like cattle. Prime Minister Li, are you suggesting that it is only right for the people of Qin to suffer? Against the Zongnu, even if it means genocide, it is still in accordance with the mandate of heaven. Ying Zheng roared, slamming his hand down. The aura of an emperor who scorns the world swept through the entire court. Countless officials trembled in fear. They had almost forgotten that this was the man who, in just a few short years, had gone from being a hostage prince to the monarch who unified the 6 states. These words, even I couldn't help but slam my hand down and cheer. The reason Ying Zheng wanted to conquer the 6 states and establish a unified Great Qin dynasty was to ensure that the people of the realm would no longer be homeless and displaced, no longer trapped by the chaos of war. At that moment, Li Si's body trembled violently. He knew he had said something he shouldn't have. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Lord Xiaobai, just as I was leaving court for the day, a delicate and charming voice called out. I turned to look, and it was none other than Zhao Ji. Soon. Although this world was a little different, this Queen Dowager Zhao was still just as graceful and charming. Ying Zheng himself was not even 20 yet, and this Queen Dowager was, at most, 33 or 34 years old. Queen Dowager, I hurriedly bowed. Lord Xiaobai, there is no need for such formalities. I have come today, because His Majesty is troubled by a matter. Lord Xiaobai, after you dealt with the grain merchants, the officials colluding with them lost everything. And now, with the drought in the southwest, many hands have reached for the allocated grain, making the multiple relief efforts completely useless. Zhao Ji said with a helpless look, droughts and floods always seem to accompany one another. After all, if it rains too much in one place, it's likely to rain too little somewhere else. I asked in confusion, doesn't the court still have millions of caddies of grain remaining? As well as plenty of silver? However, I quickly figured it out myself. Several million caddies of grain sounds like a lot, but it's not enough for disaster relief. For 1 million refugees, even if they were to eat only porridge for 5 days, they would finish off 1 million caddies of grain. As for the silver, hey, these corrupt officials, they will devour as much as they can get. In recent days, you have offered many brilliant strategies. His Majesty has placed great hopes in you, so he did not entrust this matter to you. Zhao Ji spoke, and with that one sentence, my expression changed slightly. I see, I had taken care of the grain merchants and offended the civil officials. If I were now sent to deal with those corrupt officials, aside from the immense pressure I would face, if I were to fail, I'm afraid an overwhelming number of complaints would be laid before the first emperor. This was the first emperor's way of protecting me. My heart grew warm, but in that instant, a plan had already formed in my mind. Please, Your Majesty the Queen Dowager, inform His Majesty that your humble servant already has an excellent plan for this matter. I immediately bowed with my hands clasped. Zhao Ji was slightly stunned. So soon? This Lord Xiaobai already had an excellent plan. The next day, inside Shenyang Palace, regarding this drought in the southwest, I absolutely cannot allow you to go. Ying Zheng shook his head in refusal. You have offended all the civil and military officials. If you go again this time, the obstacles you will face will be enormous. Ying Zheng let out a sigh. Since ancient times, power has always been about finding a balance. If you don't let these civil officials gain some small advantage, they won't carry out their duties properly. This time, if you go to the southwest, if you fail, the number of petitions submitted to impeach you will be sky high. And if you succeed, you will have thoroughly offended everyone in the imperial court, from top to bottom. The drought in the southwest, the lives of 1 million refugees. Isn't it worth my life then? I retorted. If it allows everyone in our great Qin to have plenty of food and clothing, and to live in happiness and health, then even if I have enemies as numerous as a grand army in the court, what does it matter? I dare to trade my one life for the lives of 1 million refugees, so why would I be afraid to use that same life to stand against the hundreds of ministers in the court? I continued. Good. Ying Zheng's tense face finally relaxed, and at that moment, he burst into hearty laughter. If my previous methods had at most made Ying Zheng acknowledge my abilities, then these words of mine now have made him thoroughly approve of me as a person. What my great Qin truly needs are straightforward officials like you. Capable officials. Bai Qing, rest assured. In managing this drought, you may act as you see fit. I shall remain here in Shenyang Palace. I will be your greatest support. Immediately, Ying Zheng brought out a long bronze sword. Even I was stunned by this scene. The Emperor's sword. This is the Emperor's sword of the Great Qin. Seeing this sword is the same as seeing me. Should anyone stand in your way, Bai Qing, you have my permission to execute first and report later. Ying Zheng held the sword with both hands and handed it to me. This was, since the founding of the Great Qin Empire, the only time the Emperor's sword had been bestowed upon another. When I returned to my residence, I saw a young girl standing inside. At that moment, she had her hands on her hips, looking quite displeased. To actually make me go to the southwest with this stinking brat. My imperial brother is so unfair. The fourth princess of the Great Qin was stomping her feet in anger. She had already heard that this man was some kind of living king of hell, who entraps and kills others, harms the common folk, and stops at nothing evil. I was taken aback. Since my family line was almost completely wiped out back then, it was only after Ying Zheng took the throne that I, the sole survivor, was able to enter the Qin court. Therefore, this was the first time I'd seen a stranger here. Princess Qingyang said with her hands on her hips. HMPH, this lady was sent by His Majesty, specifically to supervise you. Really? I narrowed my eyes. Supervise me? Of course. Otherwise, who knows what kind of wicked thing you villain, would do next. Princess Qingyang pouted, but her cheeks were slightly flushed. This little girl clearly wasn't very confident. Wicked? I scratched my head. Although my plans are ruthless, they seem to be quite effective, right? I helped the Great Qin deal with the Xiongnu and settled the grain disaster in Jiangnan. These are all good deeds. Apart from you, who else could do something so wicked? Those refugees were already starving, and you had to raise the grain prices several times over. You even threw diseased cattle and sheep to cause 1 million civilians to die from plague. Princess Qingyang was so mad she was practically spitting in my face. If it weren't for the chance to leave the palace, she would never have agreed to her imperial brother's request. I replied nonchalantly. I can't even be bothered to explain things to people like this. Since that's what she thinks. Think what you will. Later that night, Princess Qingyang, rubbing her eyes and looking annoyed, arrived at the granary. It's the middle of the night. What are you doing in the granary instead of sleeping? I'm adding sand. I'm holding a shovel, furiously shoveling sand. You big villain. You unscrupulous scoundrel. Don't you know this is for the poor and the common folk to eat? All her sleepiness gone, Princess Qingyang started cursing. You short-lived devil, you walking king of hell. My imperial brother sent him for disaster relief, to help the people. They already have no food to eat, and they're finally getting some grain. You have to add sand to it. Enough nonsense. There's a pile of moldy straw over there. Bring that over to me, too. Also, there are rotten rags over there. Throw all the trash from the palace over here, I said, pointing to the side of the granary. If Princess Qingyang was only a little angry before, now her little round face was completely puffed up with rage, her cheeks swollen. This is so vicious. What kind of cruel torture is this? Adding sand was one thing, but you're also adding rags? Throwing in trash, and even adding moldy grain. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning for doing something so wicked? I won't do it. Princess Qingyang put her hands on her hips and snorted coldly. And she secretly resolved to write all of this down and show it to her imperial brother, so he could see what kind of monster this beast in human skin really is. The next morning, I set out with Princess Qingyang and a long train of grain carriages heading for the southwest region. Along the way, the officials at the various post roads were already rubbing their hands in glee, their eyes burning with greed. Haha, I heard that kid brought a whole 3 million jin of grain this time, Lord Li. You take 100,000 jin, and I'll take 200,000. By the time he reaches the southwest region of his 3 million jin of grain, not even half will be left. And the first post road was set up just outside Shenyang City. The one in charge was the station master of the Shenyang Post Station. Li Tongyu. Halt. Routine inspection. The entire train of 1,000 grain carriages was brought to a stop. Even disaster relief supplies are subject to routine inspections. No wonder the aid is never effective. I grumbled to myself, looking at the grain train stretching for 10 li. Li Tongyu's eyes practically glinted red. This was all shiny silver for the taking. Besides, it was ordered from above. That I was allowed to be greedy. Sir, something's not right here, his attendant quickly said. Li Tongyu frowned. You can't even steal properly. Rustle, but as soon as the grain sack was opened, a moldy, rotten smell immediately hit them. And that wasn't all. It was also mixed with a large amount of sand and stones. There was even rice bran in it. His eyes widened. Who the hell would want this stuff? It's not worth a dime. They wouldn't take it even if you gave it away. This kid is truly vicious. At most, I would only skim a little off the top. I wouldn't go so far as to leave the disaster victims with nothing to eat. But he actually pulled a stunt like this. Passing off shoddy goods as quality ones, the corruption is enormous. Millions of pounds of grain ruined in an instant. He's trying to starve those millions of disaster victims to death. A look of glee immediately flashed in his eyes. Report it immediately. Even a corrupt official like him thinks this person's greed is too outrageous. What kind of good person is he? He's just a wicked devil. Princess Qingyang held her waist, pouted, and said, I just gave him a quick glance. I didn't say anything. Afterwards, I continued forward. All those station masters along the way who wanted to get a piece of the action. And all the officials were completely dumbfounded. I was just trying to scoop a little something from the pot, but you went and smashed the whole pot. And now, inside Shenyang Palace, countless memorials were submitted. That day, at the morning court session, as Ying Zheng rubbed his eyes, he saw countless civil officials, agitated and furious. Your Majesty, reports have come from many post stations that Bai Zhan is mixing sand into the disaster relief grain. Not only that, but also scraps of cloth, moldy food, and all sorts of sand, stones, and trash. Passing off shoddy goods as quality ones. He even dares to embezzle the disaster relief grain. And on such a massive scale. We implore your Majesty to investigate this thoroughly. Li Si immediately stepped forward, a cold smirk playing on his lips. Bai Zhan has been scoring major points with his Majesty lately. Now's the time to drag you down. It wasn't just him, many other civil and military officials also submitted their own memorials. At this moment, Ying Zheng also frowned deeply. His capable minister actually did something like this? Could it be that I truly misjudged him? Mixing sand in the grain is too vicious. This isn't food for just 1 or 2 people. It's for millions of disaster victims. If a riot breaks out. However, soon after, as a wise ruler of his generation, Ying Zheng knew very well that for him to do this, there must absolutely be a reason. The actions of the Marquis of Tianshan. Perhaps there's a good reason for it. My lords, please be patient. We will wait for more news from the southwest before making a decision on the specific details. Ying Zheng waved his hand and spoke, facing the accusations of the entire court. He was also under immense pressure. But, Your Majesty, if we detain Bai Zhan now, the grain hasn't been distributed to the victims yet. There's still time to deliberate. But if we wait until he starts distributing the grain, it will be too late to stop. Li Si quickly stepped forward and said. The many other civil and military officials also hurried forward. We implore Your Majesty to consider the millions of disaster victims in the southwest. In that moment, the entire Qin court spoke with one voice. We implore Your Majesty to consider the millions of disaster victims. Voices rose and fell throughout the court hall, and sweat trickled down Ying Zheng's palm. Bai Zhan, oh Bai Zhan, I hope you do not disappoint me. At this moment, I arrived in the southwest region, and the scene before me was utterly shocking. Countless victims, so thin they were nothing but skin and bones, were scattered all over the mountains, throughout the forests, and on the streets. Everywhere the eye could see was filled with starving refugees. Their eyes were lifeless. Some were lying on the ground, looking up at the sky, while others had their faces to the earth, gnawing on plant roots in their hands. As far as the eye could see, all the green vegetation had been devoured. This scene left me stunned. During the first disaster relief, the situation was much better than this because the people there had handed over all their savings, so they could at least survive for a while. It's my fault. I bit my lip. It was because I raised the grain prices. There's a shortage of grain here, yet the grain merchants don't dare to come. They're afraid of being ripped off. And also because of me. Those civil officials wanted to recoup their losses, which led to the court's million jin of relief grain not even making a ripple. You want to prey on the people? I won't let you. You want to starve them all to death? I, Bai Zhan, will make sure every single one of them survives. A vicious glint flashed in my eyes. When it comes to being ruthless, I have never been afraid of anyone. And so, I descended upon Southwest City, where the local magistrate, Long Qianshu, had already arranged for 2 million jin of grain. Today, we'll directly release 100,000 jin to To be cooked into kanji. Make the arrangements at once. I was clutching the Imperial Envoy's decree, giving Long Qianchu no chance for pointless chatter. Lord Bai, you've just arrived in our southwest city. You're not yet clear on the current situation. We have over 3 million refugees right now. Lord Bai, if you distribute over 2 million jin of grain like this, I'm afraid it will be gone in half a month. I spoke coldly. I'll give you 2 options. Either you distribute the grain, or you're immediately removed from your post as magistrate. As the Imperial Envoy, I have absolute authority in handling the disaster. Long Qianchu's expression changed slightly. This legendary, living king of hell, was already showing his teeth the moment he arrived. However, since he wanted to take the blame himself, then let him. That day, Southwest City released 100,000 jin of grain and cooked 1 million portions of kanji. Countless refugees were overjoyed, but when they lined up one by one and arrived at the government's relief station, they were dumbfounded. Call this freaking grain? Old shoes, sand, rocks, why the hell is this stuff everywhere? At this sight, a hint of a smile flashed in Long Qianchu's eyes. And why wouldn't it? It was so vicious. Millions of people had already gone more than 10 days without a decent meal. The relief grain had finally arrived. And you pull this kind of crap on them. As expected, soon, the sound of endless cursing erupted. Damn it, something's wrong with this kanji. There's sand in this. It's not just sand. There are shoes, too. These officials are all animals. Before, when they distributed grain, we couldn't even get 1 bowl of kanji in 3 days. Now that there's grain, they give us this stuff. I swear, even if I die, I'm going to Shenyang to report him. Countless refugees were seething with rage. They were on the verge of rioting at the relief station. If it weren't for the fact that these people hadn't eaten properly for days, lacked the strength, and the bailiffs were there to help. Otherwise, I'm afraid all these cooking pots would have been overturned by now. Long Qianchu was just short of clapping his hands and cheering. Now, someone else was taking the fall completely. As for me, I paid no mind to these things. I completely ignored it. Princess Qingyang looked at me with a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. Everyone outside the county yamen wants to report you. Aren't you afraid, you scoundrel? But at that moment, I was busy building a giant windmill. This so-called drought, to put it simply, is really just a lack of rain from the sky, which causes the crops to fail. A 2-year drought is manageable, but if it's a 3 or 5-year drought, once the common people run out of their surplus grain, they can only resort to begging on the streets. A drought isn't a lack of water. It's a lack of rain. And what I'm doing is actually a simple windmill device to channel water. As long as the wind turns the windmill, it can bring water into the people's fields. Why should I be afraid? I just need to wait quietly through today. I said calmly. Hey, wait for what? Wait until they've all eaten that moldy stuff and been poisoned to death? You despicable man, you're too cruel. To embezzle such a small amount of money, you're willing to gamble with the lives of 1 million refugees. Seeing my indifferent expression, Princess Qingyang's face turned red with anger. But my expression remained calm. With a massive roar, the main gates of the county yamen were blasted open. Crowd of peasants, who had just eaten their fill, grabbed various wooden clubs as weapons. In an instant, they charged toward my residence. Brothers, charge with me. This beast of an imperial envoy embezzled the disaster relief grain from the imperial court. He even mixed sand and garbage into it. Kill him. I've never seen such an audacious bastard. Rather than be poisoned to death, rather than die of humiliation, it's better to fight back. This kind of animal can't be allowed to live. In an instant, countless refugees swarmed over. At that moment, I was completely stunned. The county yamen was actually breached, but thinking about it, it makes sense. Before the grain was distributed, these people had no strength. Now that they've eaten and drunk their fill, a whole crowd is charging over. A few dozen bailiffs can't stop them. That's the imperial envoy from above. Brothers, grab your weapons. Surround him. Fight. It's that bastard. Slaughter this animal, this major corrupt official. Killing him would be a service to our great Qin. I was instantly surrounded in this scene. It made me frown, even though I had mixed things into it. I didn't embezzle a single cent. As for this moment, not far away, Long Qianchu was watching this unfold with great interest. If the imperial envoy is killed by a mob, even his majesty won't be able to do anything, right? After all, the boy brought this upon himself. Just as countless refugees surrounded me and were about to make their move, the emperor's sword was suddenly unsheathed. A glint of cold light reflected, and the air all around seemed to turn frigid in that instant. This is the emperor's sword. I am the imperial envoy personally appointed by the court. If you dare to touch me, it is an act of treason. The crime of treason is punishable by the execution of your 9 relations. I spoke with a calm expression, holding the sharp sword. This scene left the countless refugees stunned where they stood. They truly weren't afraid to die, but the execution of their 9 relations. You can blame me now, I don't care. But give me 5 days time. Within 5 days, I will give you an answer. If I cannot, I will relinquish this emperor's sword. There will be no need for you to act. I will hang myself in Southwest City to appease the people's anger. How about it? At this, the countless refugees froze, their makeshift weapons in hand. Since I had already said such words, they also calmed down. HMPH. Fine, we'll give you 5 days. After 5 days, if we're still eating moldy grain mixed with sand, we will surely kill you. That's right, and, if you dare to run, even to the ends of the earth, we will chase you to Shenyang and report you to His Majesty. The refugees were all incensed, their eyes looking like they wanted to eat me alive. They all seemed to have forgotten one thing. The last imperial envoy who came distributed 50,000 caddies of grain a day, while I distributed 100,000. Although it wasn't much, and it was mixed with all sorts of things. They were, after all, eating their fill. Yes, their stomachs were full, otherwise they wouldn't have had the strength to charge all the way here. The many refugees slowly retreated, and I sheathed the Emperor's sword. I went back to tinkering with the windmill, perhaps because she was surprised by the sight of me holding the long sword. Single-handedly intimidating the countless refugees, Princess Qingyang couldn't help but come over, intrigued. After 5 days, are you really going to give them clean grain? I shook my head. I won't. This made the little bit of favor Princess Qingyang had begun to feel for me drop to 0 points. And I thought this guy was so righteous and imposing that he actually had a solution. But it turns out, he's still that same corrupt official, the living king of hell. HMPH. Then you just wait for 5 days from now. Be hanged by those refugees. I certainly won't be saving you. Princess Qingyang put her hands on her hips and then snorted coldly. I still ignored her and continued to make the windmill in my hand. And it wasn't that I hadn't thought about finding someone to help, but as soon as they heard it was for me, they all just shook their heads. HMPH. I don't have the energy, and even if I did, I'd rather die here than help that corrupt official one bit. Countless refugees cursed in anger, and several times I was almost beaten up on the street. But I just kept making windmills by myself, grinding away. I continued to install them. And 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. When countless refugees woke up early and came to the relief station, they saw that in the steaming pots there was still garbage floating around, along with all sorts of moldy grain, sand, and so on. Their anger had already reached its breaking point. That cowardly little man, that animal. He said he'd solve everything in 5 days. I think he was just trying to fool us. Right, and I also heard he's reduced the food supply these past few days. Now he's only giving out 50,000 jin a day. That corrupt official. Brothers, grab your weapons. This time, even if it means rebellion, I'm going to kill him. Countless refugees once again picked up their weapons, while the many Yamen runners merely put on a show. They didn't try to stop them at all. They had received a hint long ago. If he was killed by these people, they wouldn't have to take responsibility. And at that moment, I was setting up my windmills, completely unaware that from all directions, a dense crowd of refugees had already grabbed their weapons and were surrounding me. This time, it wasn't just a few thousand people like before. Instead, everyone from 10 li around had gathered. Every single one of them was seething with rage, holding shovels, iron rods, and wooden clubs in their hands. Corrupt official, we've got you now, a refugee shouted, and in that instant, a hand grabbed me. In a moment, all the refugees swarmed in. Kill him, a multitude of refugees cried as they surged forward. And this scene also made Long Qianshu, who was watching from a distance, almost laugh out loud. Now he was curious to see how the Marquis Tianshan, so renowned for his wisdom, would get out of this. This is the promise you made, after all. Even with my hand in a tight grip, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew that these people were also waiting for me to speak. If this time, I couldn't give them a reasonable answer, I was afraid they would really kill me. Everyone, I have been in Southwest City for 6 days now. Have any of you gone hungry? Just that one simple sentence caused the countless refugees to fall silent. Indeed, there's all sorts of garbage in it, and yet, they each get 3 bowls of kanji to eat every day. Even when the grain was reduced to 50,000 jin these past few days, they were still able to eat their fill. When the previous imperial envoy came, he went through 30,000 jin of grain, and not only was the kanji watery and thin, we only got 1 bowl of white kanji a day. It was barely enough to keep us alive. Even if we have kanji to eat, you can't just stuff all that filth in it. The grain allocated by the imperial court was meant for us in the first place. How dare you? In that instant, countless people started shouting curses, mixing all sorts of garbage into the grain. I think this guy is treating us like livestock. Brothers, let's kill him first, he shouted, his expression unreadable. If I didn't mix those things in, then tell me, how would I distinguish the real disaster victims from the fake ones? The Southwest City reported that there were 3 million disaster victims, but in the entire vicinity of the Southwest, the land affected by the drought is less than 3 million mu. Each of you here owns at least 3 to 5 mu of land, correct? So, what does that mean? It means some people are posing as disaster victims. I spoke word by word, my voice strong and resonant. In an instant, these words spread, causing countless victims to come to their senses. That's right, there are less than 3 million mu in total, so where did 3 million victims come from? And, it really seems that ever since Lord Bai arrived, the number of people collecting relief grain has dropped a lot, and those bailiffs don't even bother going to the pot for kanji anymore. Usually, the yamen runners from the government office would wait until the end to gobble up the thickest kanji for themselves. Now they can't even be bothered to look at it. There's a pile of sand at the bottom. This Lord Bai, it seems he truly has our best interests at heart. I mixed sand into it, so that people who aren't truly starving to death wouldn't even consider drinking it. This has reduced the number of people scrambling for kanji by almost a third. Moreover, because this garbage grain isn't valuable, from Shenyang to the southwest, not a single person would dare to skim from my grain shipment. This official brought 3 million jin, and 3 million jin will be distributed. I also invite all of you to supervise. Not one person will embezzle a single grain of rice meant for the suffering victims. I spoke again, my voice growing louder and louder, like a clap of thunder, resounding across the fields. All at once, countless victims came to their senses. That last imperial envoy, the higher-ups said 1 million jin of grain were allocated. But in the end, at 30,000 jin a day, it didn't even last for half a month before it was all gone. But this time, Lord Bai dares to say he brought all the grain without any being skimmed. Doesn't that mean it can last for 1 or 2 months? By then, the grain in other prefectures will be harvested, and we can borrow some. We'll be able to make it through this year. We've all wrongly accused Lord Bai. We even brought weapons to harm Lord Bai. Doesn't that make us the real animals? Countless commoners snapped back to reality. Although most of them don't have a mind of their own. They're not heartless. They know who is truly good to them. Once they thought about it, it was actually crystal clear. For Lord Bai to mix sand in the grain, imagine the pressure he must face from the imperial court. That's a crime punishable by death. For us, Lord Bai is willing to go against the imperial court. Just so we, the people of Southwest City, can have full stomachs. What a just and righteous Lord. Lord Bai, it was us. We were wrong. Countless commoners quickly knelt down. In an instant, it was like a gale sweeping through the forest. Throngs of people all knelt, every single one of them overcome with shame. They lowered their heads, their hearts filled with nothing but profound respect for the man before them. This scene left Princess Qingyang, who was watching from the side, utterly dumbfounded. To think, he mixed in sand so that the real victims of the disaster could eat their fill. Throwing in garbage, adding moldy food, was to prevent those corrupt officials from stealing the relief supplies. To do all this, if the imperial court were to investigate, these are all crimes punishable by death. And yet, he was willing to risk his own head, his entire official career, in exchange for the lives of 1 million victims, to ensure that they would not die of starvation. Princess Qingyang's original hatred and prejudice toward me vanished in an instant. The very sight of this man seemed to have grown so much taller in that moment. As for Long Qianshu, who was watching from afar, he was so stunned that he stood rooted to the spot, unable to speak for a long time. Had he planned for all of this since the moment the grain was shipped? With a single strategy, he dealt with the officials along the route, and at the same time, weeded out those who snuck in among the victims to get free food and drink, and on top of that, he even dared to gamble his own career for the future of the common folk. Ruthless. He's ruthless toward others, and even more ruthless toward himself. Long Qianshu, an old hand who had clawed his way through the bureaucracy for decades, couldn't help but feel a surge of respect for Bai Zhan's plan. Even though their political positions were polar opposites, this was a form of respect for a rival. Rise. I didn't come here to have you all kneel before me. I raised my hand, showing none of the arrogance of an imperial commissioner. This only made the victims think even more highly of me. But then, someone saw what was in my hands. This strange, large frame, and my hands, which were covered in bloody marks because I'm no good at carpentry and had no one to help me. My hands were covered with bloody scratches. Lord Bai, what is that? One of the commoners asked curiously. I smiled without a word and gently released the latch on the simple wind-powered water pump. At that very moment, a gentle breeze swept by. In that instant, the fan was set in motion by the wind, drawing the shallow water from the river, slowly delivering it to the lands that were once parched. Seeing this, the eyes of the countless commoners filled with nothing but pure shock. What is this masterful work of ingenuity? It's diverting the river water into the fields. This is more effective than any amount of manpower or resources. Even Princess Qingyang, who was born in the imperial palace and had seen much of the world, was staring with her beautiful eyes wide open. What I, Bai Zhan, want to do is not just to give you food for a year, but to ensure you have food every single year. I want everyone in the world to no longer fear floods or droughts. I want everyone in the world to never again worry about being cold or hungry. Driven by the windmills, the river water flowed into the parched fields. My words echoed through the mountains, and countless commoners saw those hands, covered in bloody marks. Tears welled up in so many eyes. They couldn't stop wiping their tears. So that's why Lord Bai had locked himself away in the county office, to build a tool that could feed them. And it was because they had been unwilling to help him that Lord Bai, who wasn't skilled in carpentry, had gotten his hands all covered in wounds. Oh, great Qin. Finally, there is an official who is truly willing to work for the people. A good official who cares whether they are well fed and warmly clothed. In the days that followed, I led the people in building more windmills. Because no one had helped me before, I had gone 5 days and 5 nights with almost no sleep. Suddenly, I collapsed in the fields. Countless people rushed into the streets. They had no money and no food. Yet one by one, they knelt before the apothecaries, begging them to save their Lord Bai. In the southwest, with grain all but gone, 1 million refugees stand before the apothecary's door. Why do they kowtow and kneel to the floor? The people repay a heavenly grace, thanking Bai Zhan. A simple folk poem like this instantly swept through the entire southwest city. Dozens of nearby counties also heard about this, how Lord Bai Zan single-handedly resisted all the corrupt officials of the Great Qin dynasty, and how, to ensure the people of the southwest would no longer fear droughts, he had collapsed in the fields. Sometime later, I finally, slowly regained consciousness. The redemption points in my mind had been updated again. Congratulations, host, for completing the third wicked scheme. Current redemption points, 300,000. You have also been gifted one 10-pull gacha. A 10-pull gacha? Bai Zan was stunned for a moment. There's a treasure like this? It seems this large-scale wicked scheme really paid off. Begin. A giant wheel started spinning in my mind. Congratulations, host. You have drawn the ultimate general, Wan Yu, and the general, Zhang Fei. 20 potato seedlings, 1 composite bow, 1 blueprint for an advanced catapult, and 1 looks improvement card. After the 10 pull, I was completely stunned. Wan Yu, Zhang Fei, aren't they each an army of 20,000 men? As for the looks improvement card, I used it right away. Originally, my looks were a 6 or a 7 at best. After using it, it instantly rose to a 7 or an 8. My facial features became much more defined. However, at that moment, I slowly opened my eyes, only to see that girl, Xingyang, sitting upright by my bed. How is the situation in Southwest City now? I asked. The girl deliberately pretended to be dazed for a moment. Then, pouting, she reluctantly leaned closer. You scoundrel, you went and collapsed. Those villagers were terrified. Now they're all kneeling outside asking to see you. If Magistrate Long hadn't been holding them back, this whole county town would have been trampled flat. Although on the surface she was complaining about my wrongdoings, when Princess Qingyang mentioned this matter, the corners of her mouth curled high. Clearly, the little lass was also happy about this. I continued to ask, but that doesn't mean all the rice paddies have dried up and died, does it? There are still some that are alive, they just can't produce grain due to the lack of water. You mean those spinning circles? They're really amazing. The villagers studied them on their own and have already made several thousand in the past 2 days. Now, many of the fields have water again. As the little lass spoke of this, she suddenly got excited. Those villagers are all calling you the water god. They say you can use strange things to bring water, and they're even talking about building a monument for you. The more the little lass spoke, the more excited she became, and I finally let out a sigh of relief. However, to solve the matter of the drought was not that simple at all. I still needed to proceed according to the previous plan. Work for relief. By the time I got up and went into the courtyard, Long Qianchu was already there waiting. Lord Bai, you are awake. I looked at him and replied, from this day forward, the porridge ration will no longer be limited to 3 bowls per person per day, but will be increased to 5 bowls per person per day. Furthermore, pass down my order. Every person who participates in the construction of the water channels can come to the county yamen to collect 100 wen coins per day. Long Qiancho's expression changed slightly. At this rate, the grain distributed daily would again be more than 50,000 jin. Even approaching 100,000 jin. And on top of that, we also have to pay out 100 wen coins per day. For 100,000 people, that's 10,000 taels of silver a day. Lord Bai, at present, the silver in our county yamen's treasury only amounts to 60 or 70,000 taels in total. If we allocate all of it, I'm afraid it won't last more than a day or two, Long Qianchu said. At that very moment, the long sword in my hand was unsheathed once more. Cold ring of the blade echoed throughout the courtyard. The Emperor's sword is here. Mobilize all the silver from the treasuries of all nearby county yamens. Also, how much money does the yamen truly have? You'd all better make it clear. His Majesty has granted me the authority to execute first and report later. If I find so much as a single silver coin missing, it's immediate execution. My words were as hard as iron. Long Qianchu felt a great deal of hesitation. For him to single-handedly command the nearby county yamens was truly difficult. Under the pressure of the Emperor's sword, he still had to refuse. Lord Bai, the 7 counties of the southwest, how can I alone possibly? My hand gently brushed across the longsword, its gleam reflecting across the courtyard. Magistrate Long, you should know that with my authority as the imperial envoy, there are some things I only need to investigate slightly. And I can cause a river of blood to flow through the southwest. The gleam of the longsword in my hand flickered continuously. Suddenly, a sliver of silver sword energy grazed past Long Qiancho's face. Gulp. He swallowed hard, a shiver running through his entire body. This official will see to it at once. Princess Qingyang watched this scene, completely and utterly stunned. Why did he suddenly change his tune? Princess Qingyang couldn't understand what was happening. I smiled faintly and asked Princess Qingyang in return. 2 bowls of congee is only made from a tael or 2 of rice. So why is it that after 100,000 pounds of rice are used, those hundreds of thousands of refugees still have to go hungry? The young lady scratched her head. Are you saying that rice was embezzled? To this, I simply nodded. It's more than just embezzled. After all, the congee is free. Who in the city that already has food to eat wouldn't go get a free bite? And do you think it's only the well-fed who go to freeload? What about the county magistrate in this yamen? And these bailiffs, you think they wouldn't freeload too? I sneered. For a normal person, drinking 10 bowls of congee freely is only about a day's worth of food. But for those who are starving, one bowl of kanji a day is enough to keep them alive. A county yamen has, more or less, several dozen staff members. The amount they drink in one day is enough to keep several hundred common people alive. Secondly, that clean rice has to be transported to the kanji stalls. During that process, it's inevitable that some people will skim some off the top. After all, at a time like this, ice is more precious than gold. Princess Qingyang came back to her senses. Her beautiful eyes widened. At first, she thought it was just people pretending to be refugees. She never considered the county yamen. No wonder that Long Qianchu changed his expression so suddenly. If there were a real investigation, with the Son of Heaven's sword in hand, as for the people in those southwestern counties, I'm afraid more than half of them would lose their heads. At this moment, I was being hailed as Lord Blue Sky by hundreds of thousands of real refugees, because not only did I give them kanji to drink, I also paid them wages. This undoubtedly made countless refugees cheer with joy. Meanwhile, Long Qianchu, with a dark expression, managed to scrape together the money. 500,000 taels of silver. Lord Bai, this is all that several counties could possibly scrape together. Long Qianchu said. As for this amount, I wasn't surprised. In fact, most of the time, the imperial court doesn't take all of this silver. They only move the majority of it. After all, the county yamens themselves still need to operate. The Great Qin has 700 counties alone. The annual tax revenue is only 2 million taels of silver? This also made me realize just how severe the corruption is. 700 county yamens, no matter how you look at it, should easily be able to scrape together 10 million taels of silver. Of course, when they report it, they underreport by half. During the reporting process, another half is embezzled. And of that embezzled half, the major families above take their cut. By the time it reaches the emperor's hands, I'm afraid there really are only 2 million left. Because I worked for the people, to the point that I even fainted in the fields. The story spread throughout the entire southwest, leading to a massive response to my call. Countless common people picked up their hoes and followed me to the Tianshui River. Near Southwest City, there is a river called Tianshui. It flows down from the melting snow and ice of the western plateaus and has never run dry. But the problem is, it's a full several dozen li away from the southwest. The cost in manpower and resources to dig a channel from there would be far too great. But now, with my Work for Relief program. Besides, these hundreds of thousands of people had nothing else to do, since their farmlands were all ruined. They might as well come out, earn some money, and start digging. With a loud shout, I led the hundreds of thousands of farmers, and we began. In less than an hour, I was already exhausted, with sweat pouring down like rain. My lord, there are hundreds of thousands of us digging here together. You should get some rest, farmers kept coming over to tell me. After all, there were more than enough people, but I retorted. If the officials only think about getting out of work themselves and letting you do everything, then they'll never care whether the job gets done right, or if it even gets finished at all. Because it's not them who will be worked to death, nor is it their children. My words were forceful and resonant. Even some of the villagers who were usually a bit lazy, when they heard this, felt their eyes well up, and they gripped their hoes a little tighter. That's how the common people are. If you hold them in your heart, they will cherish you in return. With me leading the way, hundreds of thousands of villagers dug together, and a great, long river was carved out of the earth. It took a full 10 days, but the eyes of everyone in the entire southwest region were brimming with joy. With this river, the southwest would never suffer from drought again. But at that moment, the entire imperial court was in an uproar. Her Majesty, Bai Zan has been adding sand to the public relief kanji, as well as all sorts of moldy food, and even garbage. This has incited the people to riot. And now, the hundreds of thousands of people in the southwest are simmering with resentment. If this isn't dealt with, the entire southwest may descend into a living hell, Li Si reported. He quickly stepped to the front to speak. This time, that vile brat Bai Zan had done something so utterly depraved. He was eager to see how His Majesty could possibly protect him. Indeed, Your Majesty, this Bai Zan is a disgrace to the title of Marquis Tianshan. Your Majesty tasked him with managing the great drought in the southwest. He made promises to the people on the surface. But in secret, he continued to serve sand-laced kanji for 5 days straight. This man harbors malicious intent. He wants to poison the Great Qin. His crimes are punishable by death. Your Majesty, you cannot afford to be lenient on this matter any longer. Countless civil and military officials came forward with their petitions. For days, news had been pouring in from the southwest. They were secretly gloating, that Bai Zan. And at that moment, Ying Zheng was feeling an immense amount of pressure. It was precisely because of the many strategies Bai Zan had devised that he had believed the man to be reliable. But who could have known that the news now coming from the southwest would be more shocking each time? Mixing sand into the food was bad enough, but you had to add garbage too? Adding garbage was one thing, but then you had to go and deceive the people, inciting them to riot. Now who is supposed to clean up this mess? And how are we to resolve this? Gentlemen, before we have a final verdict on the matter, let us not be hasty. Ying Zheng said, knowing for now he could only grit his teeth and try to placate the officials. Although he didn't understand what I was doing, deep down, he still faintly believed in me. Your Majesty, this official, Bai Zan, harboring a malicious heart, you mixed sand into the disaster relief grain. deceiving the common people and inciting a rebellion. According to the laws of Great Qin, you should be beheaded. At this very moment, outside the Great Hall, a figure in a long gray robe stepped out. And then, he began to enter the imperial court step by step. And at that exact moment, the entire hall instantly fell silent. Countless officials watched the approaching middle-aged man, all with looks of terror on their faces, each and every one trembling with fear. They dared not raise their heads. Meanwhile, Li Si secretly revealed a smile. He could finally set his mind at ease. With him here, not even His Majesty could protect Bai Zhan. The moment he saw this person, Ying Zheng's hands gripped the dragon throne tightly. He has 3,000 retainers, and half of all civil and military officials are his men. Even I, the Emperor of Great Qin, was put on this throne by him. And now, is he here to pressure me as well? Watching that familiar figure approach step by step, Ying Zheng's expression suddenly turned incredibly grim. Dongfu, Ying Zheng's face was ashen. He never imagined that Bai Zhan would actually manage to draw out Lu Buwei. Meng Tian's army is stationed beyond the pass, and the imperial guards I can mobilize were mostly trained by Lu Buwei back in the day. Your Majesty, this man has committed such a heinous crime. He deserves to be executed immediately for embezzling disaster relief grain and forcing the common people to rebel. Are you still going to protect him? King Zheng of Qin, have you forgotten the iron law established by the ancestors of Great Qin? Lu Buwei walked forward from the depths of the court, step by step. His figure was tall, and he spoke word by deliberate word. His voice grew more and more thunderous, carrying with it a terrifying, crushing pressure. All the civil and military officials on every side trembled, a chill running down their spines. Greet Chancellor Lu. Countless civil and military officials knelt in unison, paying Lu Buwei the highest respects. This ceremony was in no way inferior to the rights for an emperor. Ying Zheng's hands gripped the dragon throne tightly. His position was one Lu Buwei had helped him secure. From the time he inherited the throne at 13, to his current status after conquering the 6 states, including the appointments of most court officials. Everything was handled by Lu Buwei. With Meng Tian away, even he lacked some authority in front of this Zhongfu. Damn it, Ying Zheng cursed inwardly. In a situation like this, what am I supposed to do? If I punish Bai Zhan as Lu Buwei demands, wouldn't that be telling the whole world that the true ruler of Great Qin isn't me, but Lu Buwei? But if I don't punish him, how can I face all these civil and military officials? Ying Zheng's mind descended further into chaos. Zhongfu, the matter concerning Bai Zhan has not yet been fully investigated. For now, we still need to observe further. Ying Zheng spoke, withstanding the immense pressure. He did not want to compromise yet. In his heart, you still hold a sliver of trust for Bai Zhan and haven't investigated this thoroughly. Could it be that the letters from the southwest these past few days are all fake? Your Majesty, are you really going to let a mere child disrupt the foundation of our Great Qin? Lu Buwei snorted coldly and spoke directly to Ying Zheng. Uncle Regent, Bai Zhan has always preferred unconventional methods in his actions. It won't be too late to discuss this after a letter arrives from the southwestern city. He didn't want to bow his head because he was the true emperor of the Great Qin, ruling over the 4 seas. The one emperor for all ages whose might suppresses the 6 harmonies. And Lu Buwei was walking step by step towards the center of the Great Hall. King Ying Zheng of Qin, do you still remember the ancestral precepts of the Great Qin? Lu Buwei said, enunciating every word. His voice was so loud it was like thunder, booming throughout the entire hall. And in that instant, that ancestral precept also echoed in Ying Zheng's mind. If a future king allows a treacherous minister to hold power, and after 3 admonitions, the king still does not comply, the imperial clan court may be notified, and he shall reflect in seclusion for 3 months. All military and political power shall be temporarily handed over to the chancellor for handling. Lu Buwei replied with iron resolve, his eyes like those of a sinister, venomous snake. And as these words were spoken, cold sweat dripped down all the officials' faces. Confined for 3 months, and letting the chancellor handle things? Wouldn't that be the same as saying he's going to replace the entire court? By the time His Majesty is released, I'm afraid there won't be a single official loyal to him left in the entire court. Could it be that Chancellor Lu wants to turn His Majesty into a puppet emperor? At this moment, Ying Zheng's face turned ashen with rage. To put it nicely, it's reflecting in seclusion at the imperial clan court. To put it bluntly, it's imprisoning the king. By the time I am released, I'm afraid this empire of Great Qin will bear the surname Lu. Bai Zhan, oh, Bai Zhan, you've brought me an immense disaster. Ying Zheng began to struggle internally. No one had expected that a matter concerning a single Bai Zhan would trigger a power struggle like this. Lu Buwei came to stand before Ying Zheng, his gaze incomparably deep. Like the vast, starry sky. Your Majesty, make your choice. Will you go to the imperial clan court, or will you execute Bai Zhan immediately and rid the people of this scourge? Lu Buwei flicked his long sleeve and shouted angrily. And at this moment, countless officials seemed to see Lu Buwei returning to the court. Once again controlling the government, even usurping the emperor's power. We implore your Majesty to execute Bai Zhan immediately and rid the people of this scourge. We implore your Majesty to execute Bai Zhan immediately and rid the people of this scourge. The deafening voices rose and fell in the great hall like rolling thunder. Ying Zheng clenched his fists tightly. This scene made Li Si's heart pound even more. In front of Chancellor Lu, even the formidable King Ying Zheng of Qin was still just that former crown prince and hostage. At that very moment, a loud shout broke the rhythm in the court. Report, an 800 Li Express delivery. Urgent report from the southwest. 100,000 urgent messages from Southwest City. And Ying Zheng's expression suddenly changed. Is there news? As for all the ministers, they were also stunned. Could it be that this Bai Zhan has caused those people to rebel? The Southwest has a population of several million. If they've really rebelled, that's fine too. We can use the excuse of quelling the rebellion to ask the court for a sum of money. The officials were secretly overjoyed, even Li Si. At this moment, a faint smile hung on his lips. It must be a rebellion. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a top priority dispatch. In that case, this Bai Zhan is undoubtedly doomed. Meanwhile, Lu Buwei's gaze remained fixed on Ying Zheng. This instantly doubled the pressure on Ying Zheng. A top priority dispatch. He knew it too. Unless something extremely important had happened, such a message wouldn't normally be sent. His expression flickered with uncertainty. Am I, Ying Zheng, truly going to be outmaneuvered by these court officials? Finally, Ying Zheng summoned all his strength to speak. He let out a deep sigh. Looking at Lu Buwei, who seemed to already have victory in his grasp, he thought, I shouldn't have listened to my mother. And let Bai Zhan go manage the great drought in the southwest. The imperial envoy, Bai Zhan, led 1 million people to dig deep canals, diverting a river several li long into the southwest. The great drought in the southwest has been resolved, and there will be no more droughts in the future. 1 million people have signed a joint petition, specially sent as a top priority express, requesting your majesty to bestow a name upon this river. And also, Bai Zhan, in order to dig the canals, has improved the design of the windmill. Working day and night, he collapsed from exhaustion in the fields. The million people weep for him. They ask your majesty, in light of Lord Bai's meritorious service to the state, to not hold him accountable for the mistake of mixing sand into the disaster relief grain. If there is blame to be assigned, the million people of the southwest are willing to bear it. Zhao Gao read out the express report, his own eyes wide with shock. Again, it's another joint petition from 1 million people, and the expressions of those civil and military officials. At this very moment, all froze. Every one of them stared wide-eyed. What, a joint petition from 1 million people? He mixed sand in the grain. And you still petition His Majesty not to hold him accountable? Are you all insane? But for Ying Zheng, the gloom on his face was instantly swept away. His focus was mainly on the fact that Bai Zhan had actually led the people to dig deep canals, solving the long-standing major issue of drought in the southwest. From now on, the southwest would no longer have to worry about having no grain to plant or no food to eat. This Bai Zhan, as always, has not disappointed us. And in that instant, Ying Zheng's gaze met Lu Buwei's. At this moment, the proud emperor was full of sharp vigor, just like the time he swept through the 6 states. But Lu Buwei stood hunched over in the grand hall, creating a stark contrast between ruler and subject. Chancellor, Prime Minister Li, we did say that before the matter is settled. You shouldn't be so hasty, right? Ying Zheng clapped his hands and laughed heartily. But Lu Buwei's expression remained completely unfazed. A few flickers of gloom passed through his eyes. As for Li Si, he was already furious at this moment. All of this, how could this be? The news that came before, that these people were going to rebel. How much time has passed since then? It's one thing that they didn't rebel, but they're actually petitioning to plead for Zizan. Now, who would dare say they want to punish Zizan? That would be making an enemy of all the people of Great Qin. Li Si's old face turned black with rage, looking absolutely hideous. Your Majesty is right to lecture me. Looking at Ying Zheng's beaming face, he could only grit his teeth and speak. As for the other civil and military officials, at this moment, every single one of them had an ashen face. They never would have dreamed that this Bai Zhan actually had such a reversal up his sleeve. As for Lu Buwei, his expression was perfectly calm. This old servant is feeling unwell and will take his leave now. He bowed with clasped hands and immediately left. And as Ying Zheng watched his retreating figure, the smile on his face grew even wider. He had originally thought it was a deadly trap, but he never expected Bai Zhan to save himself from it. And what's more, he'd returned the slap, and heavily at that. Regarding the name for this river proposed by the Marquis of Heavenly Goodness, I wonder what opinions you all have. Ying Zheng swept his gaze across the court and spoke with a smile. And as for those ministers, each one looked as if they had just swallowed a fly. A name? Who doesn't know you just want to gloat? Call it whatever you please. My beloved ministers, why are you all silent? You are welcome to discuss it with us. Ying Zheng spoke again and again, but the civil and military officials all chose to play dead, every one of them with a dark look on their face. This made Ying Zheng even more delighted. Since it was the Marquis of Heavenly Goodness, then let's name it the Shan River, to symbolize Bai Zhan's great benevolence for adding a new, wide river to our Great Qin. And the officials, wanting to end this topic as quickly as possible, all spoke up one after another. Your Majesty is wise. However, once they came to their senses, they all frowned. What does he have to do with benevolence? That Bai Zhan. Still, he's a real man, to actually work himself to that point for the sake of the people. Hearing of Zizan's achievements, Zhao Ji was also astonished. To work so hard for the people that he fainted multiple times, and it wasn't just once or twice for Zizan. Clearly, he wasn't just putting on a show. He really did it. Indeed, Ying Jung nodded. However, for some reason, deep down inside, he felt a faint sense of unease. At this moment, I was lying in the county yamen. Princess Qingyang carried a bowl of kanji, her brow furrowed. Why is it this kanji from outside? Don't you know Zizan collapsed from exhaustion for the sake of the people? Princess Qingyang snorted coldly. The yamen runner was so scared he trembled. I'm the one who told them to bring this. I cut her off. But this, Princess Qingyang grew even more sullen. I'm doing this for your own good. This kanji has sand mixed in it. How can you drink this? Even if those commoners can drink it, model. What, am I not allowed to drink it? I retorted. This made Princess Qingyang let out a small huff. Oh, you're so high and mighty. Then you can just drink it yourself. She tossed the porridge down by the bed and stormed out in a sulk. I could only shake my head helplessly, but I picked up the porridge and started to drink it. The porridge, mixed with sand and trash, did smell rather awful.